Hi, I'm Charles Galda, President of Vision New England, and your host for the Church in Action program, where we talk with New England leaders about the imperatives to make disciples, do justice, foster unity, and share Jesus to transform New England. This week, I'm talking with my good friend, Annmarie Boulay. She is the Women's Ministry Director at Wintonbury Church in Bloomfield, Connecticut, but she's also the Executive Director of the Underground, and that's where we're going to spend our time talking today. The Underground is a ministry that started in Connecticut, but really works across New England and is leading the fight against human trafficking. Annmarie, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome, Charles. It's great to see you.
Thanks. And I think most people know, but I'll say it in case you missed an episode. Vision New England completed a research project of over 100 leaders around New England. Annmarie is one of them, to document the issues we believe God was exposing over the last 2 years. And what he's calling his church to be, what we need to change to not just to survive, but to thrive in a post-pandemic world. And there's tons to the research, and we have an episode that will be sharing that. But to boil it down, the post-pandemic church has to make disciples, people who are biblically literate and willing to disadvantage themselves to serve and love others, evidencing the fruit of Spirit, just like Jesus did, to do justice, and justice being fixing all of those things that violate the pre-fall order in our world, a biblical view of justice, fostering unity across the divides that the church has today, just like we have in our communities around race, sex, ethnicity, age, class, you name it, partisan politics. Because when we bridge those divides, when we do justice, when we make disciples, people want to know who Jesus is. And that's not a class, that's not a program, it's a culture change in the church. And so, Annmarie, with this biblical definition of justice as anything that violates the pre-fall order, clearly human trafficking is injustice, because God did not intend people to be sexually exploited. And so, but can you help us get a step down below that? What is human trafficking, and where does it?
Yeah. So human trafficking is, by definition, anyone who's experiences force, fraud, or coercion to commit a sex act is considered a human trafficking victim unless they're under the age of 18. And therefore, if they're doing a sex act for anything of value, it's considered child trafficking.
Because they can't give consent because they're just not old enough.
That's right.
And or right, not that anybody else is really giving consent, right? We know that's not the case. What about somebody who thinks, well, this is a small thing and it's not in my community? Is it big? Is it in our communities? Help us out.
Sure. And I appreciate, Charles, thank you for inviting me to come and represent the anti-trafficking movement, because in fact, it is a large problem throughout the United States and of course, all over the world. We know that human trafficking is the number one fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and it's second most profitable criminal business in the world, second to drugs, I believe. So, it's prevalent around the world, but we don't always understand the story in the United States and certainly in our own neighborhoods. We have focused in Connecticut. Of course, we have served in Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Massachusetts as well, but we really have learned most of our information in the state of Connecticut when it comes to child trafficking. And we collect data faithfully every year through the Department of Children and Families, which we partner with as the church. And they tell us this year over 240 children have been reported to the care line as trafficked victims, potential trafficked victims. So investigations are happening within those families. They're telling us that every county in Connecticut has reported child trafficking. And so I think we tend to tell ourselves a narrative to help us kind of comprehend what might be happening. And yeah, many times we're saying not in our town, this just doesn't happen, but it has. Every town in Connecticut has reported that children have been at risk of being exploited, or they've been confirmed as a child trafficked victim.
And so that's 240. That's just new cases. That's not total cases, because it's been more than 200 a year for a while even.
Right. I mean, we're well over the 2,000 mark at this point, but this also only represents the cases that we know, right? There's many cases that we don't know about. If you don't mind, I just like to say that what's happening now is most exploitation and trafficking is happening online. And
Mhm.
so, especially during COVID, there was a very large uptick of online social media exploitation. Groomers can hit hundreds of kids in one message, through the various platforms. And so, even in our state, we've recorded, of the kids that have been reported as possibly being trafficked, 70% of them live at home and
Mhm.
67% of them are being trafficked online. And so we've got to pay a lot more attention to that. And part of our work at the Underground is to bring awareness to youth groups, to the public at large for sure, but we're part of the church. And so we care deeply about educating our youth on how to stay safe. And frankly, we could do that every single year with each upcoming class, right? Because they need to be equipped and empowered, because certainly their devices that they hold in their hand are very powerful and sometimes unfortunately can be weapons, right? Used
And,
against
and and just to put a little more context around that 240, that's new cases. That's in the last year. That's
them.
children only,
Right,
and that's
right.
sex only, and that's the ones that are reported only. So we know it's a much bigger problem, because we know it impacts adults too, and right.
Yeah.
And so, um, with that big a problem, what does the underground do? Who is the underground, and what do you do about it?
Well, I mean, who we are, frankly, is we're a Christ-centered, faith-based nonprofit. Thanks be to God. And we designate as a religious charity who cares about eradicating sex trafficking in the state of Connecticut and well beyond. We are called the Underground New England, and we were born out of the church, actually, the Winterberry Church. Um, and the reason for that was because we learned 10 years ago that child trafficking was happening in our state. And as a leader in the church, I felt it was necessary to bring the church into this issue. And so we worked very hard at gathering churches throughout Connecticut and New England to hear first about this message of what's happening in our neighborhoods, right? And then helping people understand how we can protect our kids, which is so important. And then lastly, how the church can engage, like as far as helping through volunteering or praying or giving, because there are so many who have needs. So
Yeah.
yeah, that gives you a little bit of an overview.
And you wouldn't say this, but I always say Annmarie Boulay is ground zero on human trafficking in the church in Connecticut, and now New England too. Is that everything goes through it, because you've got a couple of hundred churches
Oh
that
yeah.
are working with you, and you're kind
Mhm.
of the traffic cop minimally. That's to minimize your role, really, but you're kind of the traffic cop in all of that, between DCF and all those churches and other
Right.
ministries that are working in New England.
Mhm.
And so I do want to clarify something, though, if we can go back for a second, because you talked about children being trafficked online. And just for our audience, those children are not 17. It's not like they're on the cusp, but some of them go down to below grade school level.
Yeah.
And so, but what do you mean they're trafficked online? How is that? Are you talking about pornography, or are they finding the children? What do you mean?
So nowadays, um, exploitation, first off, there's a whole grooming process that happens with the trafficker. And online, either social media or Snapchat or, TikTok is another a famous platform. There's so many, Charles, we can't keep up, frankly. But
Mhm.
what happens is if there's a bad actor out there and they're looking to start conversations with the youth, even young ones, right? And so they earn trust from this child, and as anybody would, the relationship continues on. More things are found out from the trafficker. They're very cunning, they're very evil usually, and they're looking for ways that they can gather information to essentially blackmail a young one into doing what it is that they tell them to do. So it moves from being a very nice romantic relationship sometimes, or just a friend, some because a child wants to belong, to very quickly converting over to, I want you to do this, and the child thinks that they need to, because now the trafficker is saying, if you don't do this, then I'm going to tell your mother about that, or I'm going to hurt your sister or your brother, or I know where you live. It just gets what happens is our kids get into relationships online that they don't understand how to get out of. And before you know it, they don't believe they have options. And we're working really hard to explain to the youth of Connecticut that that just isn't true. And that if that happens to you, you're not going to be in trouble for reporting it. In fact, you need to do that right away. Because you never can prove who's on the other side, right? So grooming is a big deal. People can disguise themselves as 14-year-olds and they're just not, right? You just don't know who you're talking to unless you really know the person. So
I think
grooming is a big piece. And then they move into actual exploitation, I want to say. And then it becomes offline where they're meeting in person and experiencing just terrible things, horrific things.
Yeah. I think we assume as adults, if somebody contacts on the internet, they're trouble, right? And I kind of operate from that, and I would never assume. But I'm not a kid, and kids are doing this all the time, and it's with friends and school friends and a friend of a friend, and and a stranger who claims even to be a friend, because some of them are, to your point, cunning. They know who you know, and now they say, right, I know. So, and before you know it, you're telling them stuff you shouldn't tell them, and it's just a downhill slide.
For sure.
To your point, they can't see a way out of it, even though, right, and then they just get in deeper and deeper and can't get out. And so I hear you doing education and awareness with young people.
Yes.
And so meaning you go into schools, and what are other things you do to help educate young people about this?
Sure. I mean, we also want to be in front of parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, like all adults need to understand how to have a conversation with the youth in their life, right? And whoever they have influence over, so that they can help youth stay safe. But primarily what we're doing is standing before schools, youth groups. We even go into churches on a Sunday. We have awareness events, as you already mentioned. So those are the ways that we're helping. We are partners with many different state agencies. So as we learn new things from them, we pass it on to the communities that we serve. So we also have a large responsibility in the state of Connecticut to provide preventative materials to youth. And we do that with both children and teenagers, so that it's all age appropriate, but the church is actually providing some tools that kids can use, so that if they are in trouble, they know how to get help.
And I know one way you do that is through the backpacks you do, and you do hundreds of backpacks every year. And so can you share with folks what you're doing with the backpacks?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's we have a program we're doing right now called 5 Days of Freedom. And on the third day in the month of August, we're asking our partner churches to build backpacks for school-aged children and youth. Those will be distributed throughout Connecticut. And we take orders from the Department of Children and Families, Love 146, SERI, Bloom, Community Solutions. So those are all
other ministry and agencies that are working with children.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And actually, we're the ministry amongst the state agencies. So it's a real blessing to be able to do this for DCF and the partner agencies, because God uses these backpacks, first of all, to bless a child with absolute needs that they have for school. So they're abundantly packed with very high-end, school supplies, right? And then we provide a note of encouragement, and we also provide tools so that they can stay safe. That's given to a frontline worker, and that frontline worker has relationships with literally 50, 60 kids. And there's many frontline workers in Connecticut. And so they distribute these backpacks one-on-one. And they're able to have conversations with the youth to build relationship, but also, and even to the child that they're working with, but also helping them to understand if they enter into trouble, there's help. And the last thing I want to say about those encouragement cards, the best thing the kids enjoy the most are those, to know that somebody cares about them, that really doesn't even know them, that's praying for them. That's been a big blessing to the kids of the state. So.
Now, I know you train law enforcement, and you also educate businesses about, hotels and hospitality industry about their obligations in this. And so you run a pretty big gamut of raising awareness, but I know you also serve survivors too.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little about work with survivors and what you all do?
Yes, I appreciate that. So the underground works with both minors and adults, but minors typically what we're providing in the state are resources that the state can't ordinarily access. For the adults, the reason why we've moved into this kind of work is because every child grows up to become 18, typically.
Mhm.
Right. And if they've experienced human trafficking as a child, it's very difficult for them to suddenly stop that behavior as an 18-year-old because that's kind of all they've been trained on. That's what
Yep,
they
yep.
know. Their whole grid has been distorted, from the time of exploitation. Their innocence has been stolen, you name it. So we're trying to work with and successfully doing that. We're working with young adults and really any adult that wants to come out of the life, but particularly our eye is on young adults to try to help them find a pathway of care so that they can experience freedom and liberty in the name of Jesus. Um, our work is absolutely discipleship. We're bringing people along. Um, yeah, and right now we're also providing some housing security, food security to the people that we work with. We will assist with bills if they have, different household bills that they might need assistance with. We provide scholarships for retraining. We believe in that. Um, we believe that the only way to help people live free is to equip them. So, I mean, this is the church being the church really in action. And so it's a gift to be able to minister to these folks. And we're doing that in a successful way. And that would be our mentor program. So we've taken the biblical model of mentoring from the church and just have brought it now into the community.
And so I hear a lot of basically money in that: money for food, money for housing, money for bills, money for training, money for education. And so, of course, if you're listening and you feel called and convicted, money is something the underground needs. But you also do walk-in centers
Mhm.
or outreach centers, I guess I should call them, and
Yeah.
housing for survivors through a partnership with Amira. And so, can you
Yeah.
talk about where those are? What I know you can't say specifically where, but like the walk-in centers and the work with Amira. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the underground partners. So you started touching on that a bit ago. I think you kind of see me as the center of that, but really the underground, the whole deal with us is to be unified with various agencies, including state and certainly ministries, and the church is the most powerful piece of unity, right? And so um, we are working when it comes to centers, right? We have a partner named Bloom. They're part of the Salvation Army. They have a couple of centers throughout the state of Connecticut. And so our team of mentors are going into their centers and we're building bridges and we're teaching different life skills and we're just having group sessions, helping people, again, achieve some freedom. So the center work is greatly important because sometimes people are just coming in off the street for the very first time. So we do that regularly as a team, and we do that together with Bloom. And then when it comes to Amira, we are so looking forward to our new partnership with them. The house is located in the greater Hartford area. They're looking to transition into more of an independent model living scenario. And I'll tell you from what we've seen over the past 2 years of doing this work, survivors want to be independent. They no longer want to be part of a transitional house. Not everybody fits that mold. Most of them honestly want to start to live the life that God always intended for them. And so we try to support that. Working with Amira is going to be a great gift because we really have a four-phased approach to moving people along. And Amira will fit nicely in the second and third
Mhm.
phase where we're just trying to help people transition from one life to another. You need a space of time and some stability to make that happen. And so
And
I think we're going to have 12 months to 18 months with Amira being able to house our people and significantly providing mentoring services and other resources to them
yeah,
to help
and
them
a
move on.
medical, therapeutic, right?
Mhm.
All of those kinds of things, and recovery services. And so
Definitely.
that's a great partnership there, and
Mhm.
it's always exciting to hear what you all are doing together.
Mhm.
The now you also do survivor services for youth.
Hmm.
And but there's I get a little confused about this. You've got this aging out issue.
Right.
And so you're working with youth. And can you explain to people what happens to youth who are in the foster care system when they turn 18?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even sooner than that, they can um, sign out of the Department of Children and Families
They
and
can
work
exit, they
with
can
the
choose to
independent.
leave.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly.
Okay.
And we definitely get calls from the Department of Children and Families when that happens, and they ask the underground to work with these young folks. So we've had a couple of those actually, and both, I'm thinking of two right now. Both are great successes. One young girl came to us last year, and she was homeless essentially because she signed herself out. She was having a hard time. We stabilized her. We were able to help retrain her, and then we found a more long-term placement, but we still stay in her life, and she's thriving, and just as she should be. And she's just 18. And yeah, just more recently, we've been working with a young woman, and she's just a couple of days over the age of 18, who was being trafficked, and we were called on by one of the divisions of the Department of Children and Families to help her. And she has now also been stabilized, and she's entered into placement. And again, we're still with her all the way. So we do work with the Department of Children and Families. The thing about the underground is, we will meet people in crisis and try to move them to stabilization, and then just a longer term period of just rest, right? And then we're going to move them into a placement scenario, whether it's independent living or another kind of program. But that's our work. And not every agency meets people at the point of crisis.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Well, and I don't want to gloss over that too much. You've mentioned it a few times, and I think we have this perception sometimes as Christian that government doesn't like us, and sometimes that's valid.
Yeah.
But your experience is you just went in there to serve and help
Mhm.
with people who need it, and government loves you,
Yes, they do.
right?
They
You're
love.
very closely connected to not just DCF, but I know you have input into legislation that's being crafted. They seek out your voice. You work
Yes.
with DHS, FBI,
Mhm.
local law enforcement. So when the church is doing that, what we talked about in the intro, disadvantaging ourselves to love and serve other people, government kind of likes us.
They love us, and they not only they do, and it's because you know we've been, let's see, we've been very stable, right? Like when we have said yes, our yes has been our yes, right?
Yeah.
We have never promised something that we would not go through the other side, and we've been doing this now. It's our 10th anniversary in August this year. So God has been like, these relationships are the heart of our work, frankly. um, I believe the Lord wants the church and the state to work together, and we are doing that with great success. And they love us because they recognize that when a child's been trafficked, it's a moral issue. Like, God needs to be part of their recovery. There's no doubt about it. We would never force anybody to, do something they wouldn't want to do when it comes to faith. But believe me, we freely share where we're at with our faith, and people like what they see and they want what we have. And we walk alongside, and it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, we were able to baptize a couple of survivors just a few years ago, and they ended up falling in love and becoming married, for goodness sake. So
Mm,
we see the Lord doing great things, and it was a Christian wedding, and they're still Christ followers. Yeah, and they're still with us. So yeah, I could go on and on and on. The state does love our work for real, and our partners. So the ones that are would say, "Hey, I love God, but I haven't become a 501c with a Christian designation." We did that because we want to be true to the fact that God called us to this work, and frankly, it is His work, and it is the work of the church. And so we want to be true to that. We weren't going to not be a Christian
Now,
organization.
some people are listening though, Annmarie, and say, "Well, God, my heart is broken for this. God bless you. You are equipped in a way I could never be equipped. I couldn't begin to do this type of ministry or work.
Mhm.
Um, but you didn't have any particular equipping for this. And so, can you speak a little bit about how did you get into it?"
Mhm. Um, So I had learned from my husband that human trafficking was happening around the world.
Mm,
But I didn't know it was happening in Connecticut or in this country with children.
yeah,
And it was in 2012 when my pastor, Andre Riendo, mentioned that to me. And that's when God started calling me in a real way to bring the church into this work, not only in Connecticut, but, as far and as wide as we can extend this message, so that the churches will stand in the gap. For those that are on the fringes, for the least of these, I mean, we heard it at your Vision New England conference many times. The Lord wants us in these broken places. It blesses us to be able to minister in those places, and it certainly blesses the ones that we're ministering to, right? And so
yeah,
that's how I got into it. I had no desire to be in the anti-trafficking field at all.
mm,
Not at all. In fact, it offends me that this is even something that happens in our country for real. But frankly, after I got over the offense, I got busy doing the work, and I just stayed in step with the Lord. I never went ahead of the Lord. I waited on Him. We prayed 2 years before we ever stepped out in ministry. So in 2014, when we started, partnering with the Department of Children and Families, it had already been bathed in 2 years of prayer, right? And so,
mm.
yeah, God just started to open up doors and we walked through them.
And in reality, there's a lot you can do in your work without being the person who's a frontline counselor with someone who's surviving this, which many of us aren't equipped to do
Right.
and aren't called to do. But you don't have any special training to pack a backpack,
Mm-mm.
right? Or hand out a poster at a hotel,
Mhm.
right? And so
That's
there's
right.
a lot to do. And prayer is something you
Mm.
can do, and money is something you can do.
For sure.
And
Hmm.
so in 2 minutes, Anne-Marie, we're wrapping up. For somebody who's saying, I am called and convicted,
Yeah.
how can they get engaged?
Yes. Well, you just named a few. I think the most powerful thing that we can do together, if you're interested in this kind of work or letting your community hear about this kind of work, is to bring an awareness event to the territory. So when we bring awareness events, we typically have churches host those because we've been invited, and they gather churches within their community to come, and they also gather their community into these awareness events. And so we're always praying for the Lord to fill rooms to capacity, and we bring a team of experts from different stakeholders. So somebody represents DCF, somebody's a victim advocate, we have law enforcement stand with us, and service providers. So we tell the whole story of what child trafficking looks like. And again, just because a child turns 18 doesn't make them any less of a victim. So we're really about educating, keeping kids safe online. So if there's somebody out there that would like to do that, they can contact me. That's where it starts, because when you get an audience of people who are just normal citizens hearing this for the first time, typically they want to stay engaged and they do want to do something. The Underground has a prayer night every single month. Even we have seen God answer our prayers over and again, Charles. We would not be here without the Lord's favor and His answer to our prayers. I mean, we have a rich history of yeses from the Lord. And so stand with us in prayer. That's very simple. You even get the prayer email every month, Charles, so we're active in prayer. So folks can do that. They can do an awareness event. They can certainly, I can help them with building backpacks, or if they'd like to do a boots on the ground kind of activity, we equip our churches to go out and share awareness through signage that goes into businesses, and that's mandated in some of the New England states. So besides the Underground doing our work, the other part of our work is to equip the church. And so, yeah, if anybody is interested, there's plenty that we can have you help us with.
And to do that, they can go to remind me the URL for the website, underground.
Yes, it's the undergroundne.org.
The undergroundne.org. If you have trouble finding it, email me and I'll get it to you.
Yeah.
And Annmarie, thank you for
Mhm.
being a good friend. Thank you for all your support, but thank you for your ministry in one of the most crucial areas of need. And so thanks, and bless you for making time for us today.
Thank you, Charles. I love you so much. You keep doing the good work you're doing and bringing New England together.
Thank you. I
God bless you.
appreciate that. Thanks. I'd also like to thank our producer, Jess Mangano, and our listeners. We hope this dialogue helps us be the people of God who do the work of God, doing justice in this case, to transform our world. Visit us at visionnewengland.org for past episodes and resources, and click donate to partner with us to accelerate evangelism in New England. This program is brought to you by our friends at the Luis Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide.